It's 9 minutes to 7 right now. Bad news for Generation Rent. Rental prices are likely to skyrocket. According to this month's Property Institute Velocity Regional Insights report, it's due to a perfect storm in rental market conditions. With all the details, Property Institute Chief Executive Ashley Church is with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Hilary.
OK, so there is a lack of supply. What else is driving these rent price increases?
So let me give you a bit of background on this. So I come and talk to you and Jack about property on a pretty regular basis, and I give informed comment on what's going on in the market, and sometimes that pans out to be correct, and sometimes there's a variation of that actually happens. But occasionally there's a slow train wreck happening that you absolutely recognise, and there's no doubt about what's going to take place, and that's what's happening here. So let me throw some numbers at you that are really important in the context of this debate. When you talk about rental property in New Zealand, there's around about 525,000 units in New Zealand. In fact, there's probably more. The vast majority of those, and this is as of 2014, were provided by the private sector, 450,000 plus of those units. Right. Housing Corporation currently owns about 65,000 units. Councils between them provide about another 8,500 throughout the country. So as you can see from those figures, the vast majority are provided by the private sector, and that's not a new thing. That's traditionally been the case. The private sector is the main supplier of rental accommodation. So, if those units, if somebody doesn't invest in property, if an investor doesn't invest in the property market, the need for that unit doesn't disappear. Somebody else has to provide it in the form usually of the state, or people become homeless at the extremes. So let's actually have a look at what's happening before our eyes in the rental property market. We know, for example, that there's pressure on housing stock, and we know that that's caused by migration and more recently as a result of those high LVRs, which have scared some people out of the market or made it impossible for investors to get into the market. We know that anecdotally that rental listings are falling, that there are fewer rentals actually coming onto the market, and that's a result again of that pressure on the market. We know from the Property Institute Velocity Market Insights report that rents are increasing, 4.5% across the country for 1 to 2 bedroom units, 4.2% for 2 to 3 bedroom units. And if we look in some locations, so it's not just Auckland, we know that in Hamilton there's been a 9.2% increase for 1 to 2 bedroom units. In Dunedin there's been a 14.6% increase in 2 to 4 bedroom units. And if you're in Christchurch and you want a unit over 5 bedrooms, there's a 26.8% increase. So big numbers.
So why the sudden increase in places like that? Hamilton, Christchurch, Dunedin?
Because supply is diminishing, because there are fewer units in the market as a result of those things that I talked about before. But here's the kicker. Here's the really interesting thing. Against that background, you would think you would need more units. So what you'd be doing is you'd be saying to the market, we need to provide much more rental accommodation to meet that need. And we've got Phil Twyford, to be fair to him, he's building more units as quickly as he possibly can. But on the other side of the equation, we've got Grant Robertson, who's doing exactly the opposite, who's basically saying we're going to punish those nasty property investors. We're going to do whatever we can to actually get them out of the market because they're a blight on the market. We're going to bring in, going to put more pressure around, excuse me, I've lost my train of...
No, that's right. I mean, they're banning foreign buyers, that they've still got the LVRs there, which is a major problem. Yep.
All of those things designed basically to get private investors out of the marketplace, which is absolute insanity in the context of where we are with the market and where we need to be in terms of increasing supply. Those measures which are around ring-fencing tax losses, which are around potentially introducing capital gains taxes, those things are going to have exactly the opposite effect to what the market requires right now. It's insane.
Okay, insane. So what they need to do immediately is back away from any capital gains tax and get rid of the LVRs ASAP? Well, will that help as well?
Bigger than that, I would argue that they need to do in the economic policy space what Twyford's doing in the infrastructure space. Twyford's building more units. That's fantastic. But we need to be sending exactly the same message in respect of economic policy, which is to say doing things that are going to encourage people to invest in property. So that's programs to get more, obviously, young Kiwis into houses, because that's been important right throughout this process. Abandoning this envy-fuelled attacks on property investors, recognising that they're actually part of the solution. And to be fair, I would concede that probably one of the problems of the boom has been that we've had investors investing in existing stock rather than building new stock, so putting much more emphasis on things that are going to encourage people to build new dwellings, doing everything possible to get the private sector actually building rentals. That's the solution to the problem, not attacking them and treating them as if they're part of some major problem that needs to be resolved.
Okay, we'll clip this up and we'll make sure that Grant Robertson gets to see it, the slow-moving train wreck that you've highlighted this morning. Lovely to talk to you, Ashley.